This video only exists because Jeremy Kyle accidentally guilt-tripped me into making it. I fucking hate life. So unless you're the Russo brothers or somebody directly involved in the creation of Avengers Endgame, you probably shouldn't get too upset with this video. Remember that it's just a movie, and this is just my opinion, so don't go on a mad one in the comments if you're not a fan of what I'm about to say. Oh, and if it seems like I'm rushing at any point, I am. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, I just got back from the cinema, I've got a lasagna in the oven with like 7 minutes left, and I really don't like it when it gets crispy around the edges. It's not for me. So I'm gonna aim to finish this one in under 7 minutes. Let's go. Oh, wait. I just want to make it absolutely clear before we start this thing that overall, I actually really enjoyed Avengers Endgame. There's just a few moments that are kinda bugging me, and it'll probably keep me up all night if I don't vent about them to someone. And given that my girlfriend is in the land of Nod right now, I reckon doing it online with people who probably don't care all that much about my opinion is my best option. Let's go! 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, the whole time travel thing is absolute ass. They establish some of the wackiest time travel rules I've ever seen on screen, but then completely ignore those rules whenever it suits the plot, all while having the cheek to mock movies that did time travel so much better than they do. Basically, One Punch Man explains that if you go back in time and change something, your present won't have changed when you return to it, but instead you'll create a new timeline that branches off the moment you make the change. So whenever they take a stone from the past into their present, a new timeline is formed where that stone no longer exists, but then that timeline is closed as soon as they return the stone. Pretty straightforward. Until the end of the movie, when Steve goes back to the 40s and gets married to Peggy and doesn't return to his own present. Now, by the rules that they established earlier in the movie, this should have put Steve into a new timeline. But somehow, he shows up in his present timeline as an old man. So now apparently changing the past does change the present? And if that isn't the case, the only other two options are either that from this point on, the MCU is following the branched off timeline that Steve created and not the original timeline, or that I don't understand time travel and neither do the writers, because it isn't real.
Well, how can Nebula kill herself from the past but still exist in the present? And why is it that Rhodey and Nebula return to the present at different times but arrive back at the same time? And why was it necessary that everyone went back in time to gather the stones on limited pin particles, but in the end Cap could just go by himself and return them all? And why didn't they just steal a Natasha and a Tony from the past like they did with Gamora?
Captain America shared an incestuous kiss with his own niece.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
The Hulk was weird in this one. I mean, don't get me wrong, I bloody loved Professor Hulk and the Ruffles' more comedic take on the character, but there's just something that felt a bit off with the whole thing. A couple of years ago, during the press tour for Thor Ragnarok, Mark Ruffalo mentioned that because they're unable to make another standalone film, thanks Universal, they'd instead be giving Hulk a 3-film arc, starting with Ragnarok and finishing with Endgame. Now, I think most people will agree that Ragnarok pretty much knocked it out of the park with how it portrayed the Hulk, and I personally thought the exact same with Infinity War. I loved that they were actually exploring something totally fresh with the character, and I couldn't wait to see the resolution to the Hulk-Banner feud in Endgame. And now that we've finally made it to Endgame a year later, we get Hulk doing a dab in a cafe. What? We don't get to see the conclusion to this 3-movie arc, we just get a quick 30 seconds of exposition between a selfie and a dab. Y'all ever heard of that little thing called show don't tell? Look, I enjoyed Professor Hulk, but I can't help but wonder what could have been when there's photos like this floating around on the internet. Also, where the fuck was he during like most of the final battle? Man, they did him dirty. He didn't even get his rematch with Thanos. Natasha's death bloody sucked. Alright, so in Infinity War, that whole Vormir scene was incredible. It worked great within the confines of that movie. However, revisiting it in Endgame was a mess. Remember when Red Skull said that in order to acquire the Soul Stone, you needed to sacrifice that which you love, a soul for a soul? Well, apparently, having a fight to see who can yeet themselves off a cliff first whilst desperately not wanting the other one to die still counts. Clint didn't make a sacrifice here, Nat just killed herself whilst Clint happened to be standing on the same rock. And what's worse is that I have no idea how else they could have pulled this off. They literally wrote themselves into a corner.
Nobody puts
Natasha or Clint
in a corner.
As cool as that final battle was, in the back of my mind I kept thinking about how Black Widow, one of the OG 6, should have been there. And they made it pretty explicit that they can't bring her back. And speaking of bringing characters back, when those that got the snap got unsnapped, they returned to a world that was 5 years older. This might not seem like such a big deal, but when you think about future movies, things start to get a little complicated. Take Spider-Man Far From Home, which apparently picks up minutes after Avengers Endgame. 17-year-old Peter Parker, fresh from the afterlife, goes back to school with classmates that are now 22. I suppose you could say that they all survived the snap, but fuck me, that's such a stretch. I suspect that they'll deal with this by not dealing with this, and they'll just move on as if half the world didn't disappear for 5 years. And with that, I'm done. I want to go to bed. In conclusion, the movie was alright, right? It had some, like, real good character moments and some amazing fight scenes, some of the best I've ever seen in movies in general. But maybe everyone should just take a moment or two to reflect on the story before proclaiming that it's the best movie of all time. That might sound a little bit dramatic, but let me tell you, coming out of the screen, I heard at least 2 people saying that that was the case. Clearly, they've never seen Garfield 2, A Tale of Two Kitties. Oh, and Fat Thor was real dumb. They could have achieved the exact same results with just the matted hair and the unkept beard. The prosthetic beer belly was just one step too far, if you asked me. And I wasn't really too keen on Korg playing Fortnite either. Fucking hell. Oh, and this one's just come to me. How did Cap put back the stones? The Space Stone was inside the Tesseract, the Mind Stone was inside the Scepter. Like, they would have had to have reassembled the Tesseract and the Scepter. Is that even possible? And how does he even return the Soul Stone? Like, does he just fucking rock up to Vormir and... Alright, Red Skull, bloody long time no see, mate. How you keeping? You still on with that Nazi shit, yeah? No, it wasn't great, was it?